Hello and welcome to the French Press Bookworks Author Roundtable. I am Dion Abolelo. I'm joined here today by Dorianne Dupre, who is a familiar face to you. Hi, Dory.
Hello.
We've got Richard. I'm going to butcher your last name, Richard, but is it Tatoni?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had 20 minutes before the call started that I could have asked you that, and I forgot. Richard is one of the Pen Name Publishing 2017 authors. He will be joining us with his book, Beyond the Blue Kite, which we're really excited for. Julie Sullivan should be joining us shortly, and then we should also have guest author James Stryker popping in. Unfortunately, we forgot this little thing called the presidential debate tonight, so we'll be working around that. Today, we are going to be talking writing dialogue. But before we get into dialogue, is anybody reading anything interesting?
I'm actually about to start a book called What Alice Forgot. I apologize, I cannot recall the name of the author, Lane Moriarty or something like that. It's for our local book club, and people are saying good things about it. I think it involves a lady who has amnesia, and so should be an interesting story. So looking forward to that.
Yeah. What about you, Richard? What are you reading?
Okay, I finished reading The Princess Bride over the summer, which was very different from what I started reading now, which is Naked Lunch. After reading On the Road last summer, I wanted to continue reading The Beat Generation, so I've decided to read William S. Burroughs' Naked Lunch, and I'm currently trudging through also a book of free verse poetry called Mexico City Blues, which is actually one really long poem composed in 242 choruses. It's not as well known as On the Road, but it's pretty good.
Awesome. That's really great. I like the Beat Generation. I'm a big fan, and I read a lot of Tom Robbins, and I haven't really found anyone else who shares my love of Tom Robbins in our little author group. So if you ever go there, I highly recommend Still Life with Woodpecker. I can quote like the first 3 chapters. It's crazy. I got Peter Mon to read it, and his response was, "This is one of the worst books I've ever read." So my little heart was broken. So actually, I don't have anything that I have started. Everything I picked up lately, I've put on the do not finish pile. It's just not doing it for me for some reason. I'm having a hard time finding something that I really kind of connect with. So we'll see what comes up next. So today's chat, this is a really important subject because it's something that a lot of authors struggle with, but it's also something that's so important to the book. And that is dialogue. And I'm so excited for the 2 authors that we have on here now, because Dorianne Dupre is an award-winning author. She just took bronze medal in the Reader's Favorite International Book Awards. Yay, Scouts honor.
Sorry, it just sounds really weird, award-winning.
Get used to it. And the thing that I like about your book is your dialogue is very direct. It's very to the point. It is useful, it serves a purpose, and it also comes from multiple perspectives through the book because you switch narrators. And then we also have Richard, and we had a little bit of a pre-talk here. And so Richard has really studied writing as a craft and has a lot to put into this. So let's just dive right in. First question for you guys. What do you think the purpose of dialogue is? Like, why does dialogue even matter to a book?
I would say that dialogue matters. Well, first of all, anything that moves the story along, and it's just another way to tell the story. There's so many things that you can do with dialogue. It gives the story context. It gives the characters their, maybe where they're from, their personality, and dialogue. I think the rule of thumb is anything that moves the story along is positive, and dialogue is just one of many tools to do that.
Excellent. Excellent. What about you, Richard?
Yeah, I would agree. it can dialogue can create action. It can also, you can use it for confrontation, and it can really move a story. And also, I think what's important is you want to cultivate silence as a writing tip. That's like a device that you can, once you've created that action and you have that confrontation, then you can also use it as a very powerful tool. Dialogue is something that I haven't been writing as much dialogue lately in my writing. I've been more narrative. But dialogue was something that I enjoyed more, I think, in my earlier days of writing. But I think just talking about this topic is getting me back into loving to create new characters and giving them unique voices. And
I like the, oh, sorry, before I lose this, can you expand a little bit more on what you mean by using dialogue to create silence? Because that might confuse some people a little. So can you expand on that, as far as, because most people think of dialogue as talking, and then both of you have brought up about how it creates action. And so there's more purpose to dialogue than simply creating conversation. So I want to talk more about how the dialogue creates action, but I want you to expand right now on what you mean by the creation of silence through dialogue.
yeah, I think really once you have that intensity, sometimes just saying nothing, ending something like he's really quiet all of a sudden after you've got this really engaging conflict, sometimes that can be powerful in itself. It's hard to throw an example right now. I have come across it in The Princess Bride, where it was used effectively. So it's you know, it takes a lot of practice. I would say, like, engaging your characters through confrontation, get intense in your dialogue, and then I think trying to cultivate that silence then in a way that William Goldman was able to do in The Princess Bride. And but it takes practice. And if I could, there's a quote from William Goldman that I came across on Twitter today, that he said that was interesting. It wasn't in The Princess Bride, but I came across that he said, the easiest thing to do on earth is not to write. And I found that kind of funny, because actually, like, that's interesting, because able to get that good dialogue and to write it and to have the guts to write good dialogue.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I like that it does take a lot of guts to, sorry, I got distracted by the chat window there, to create good dialogue. So Julie has managed to get back in, but she's in Dubai and her VPN is acting a little wonky, so she may join, she may not. And then James, our guest author, is in today, but it looks like he is also getting an error. James, if you wouldn't mind hitting mute on your microphone here until we're sure if you can get into the conversation. Because we're getting a little bit of like background thumps and stuff like that. But if you're ready to chime in, by all means, we really just started going, so feel free. Dory, what do you think about dialogue as far as using it to create action? How do you go about using a conversation to set the action and making it more than just a conversation?
Well, when we read, I don't really know what. It's kind of two-dimensional in a lot of ways. You're looking at words and you're trying to read what is written. And when you read dialogue, that adds that certain element to it that the reader needs to be able to have, to feel like they're present in the conversation or what is going on in the room or at the beach or whatever, wherever the dialogue is occurring. It's a way to bring the reader into the story more, and they can feel For example, the pregnant pause in between characters, or they can feel one of the characters getting angry and their voice raising, or they can hear it in their own heads, however they're hearing the character speak. And so when you write good dialogue, it's just another way to engage the reader and make them feel more present in the story. And so in that way, you know, it's not just moving the story along, but it's also, it's a way to have the reader be active, and or an active listener in a conversation, so to speak, that is just written on paper.
Yeah. So I really don't have anything to add on to that, but I want to take what you just said, Dory, and expand that a little bit. Why do you think people, or writers, I should say, why do you think writers really struggle with dialogue? And this is for anyone on the panel, they can chime in on this one as well. But why do you think it's so difficult for an author to move past dialogue as just a means of communication between their authors? Because a lot of times when we're editing a book or working on it, dialogue is a major blocking point. And there will be a period where there's like 5 pages of dialogue between 5 characters. And some of what you're saying in dialogue, you can sum up real easily with just action and cut some of that dialogue out. But authors get so attached to dialogue, and they feel like when they write dialogue, it's so crucial to the story that they're not willing to take it out. So why do you think that is? Why are we so attached to dialogue?
I think one of the reasons why is because the author wants to tell an authentic, realistic story, and they want to also impose their knowledge of whatever it is they're talking about. It's just another way to share the research that you did, you know, that might be a part of the story. And sometimes I think that a perfect example is a book I recently read, and it was a military thriller. And the man has an extensive background in aviation mechanics, and, you know, something that I know nothing about. And I found that the dialogue between the characters was so weighted down with these specific technical nobody talks like that, you know, nobody. Like, even he probably doesn't talk like that. And I think that a lot of times authors are so wanting to get their story across in an intelligent, grammar proper way that they think by writing dialogue that they are doing so, and what they're doing is really bogging down the story with unnecessary conversation that, like you said, could be summed up in a nice simple paragraph, especially for most of us who would not even know what the people were talking about.
Yeah. I was thinking of like medical dramas. And so, Richard, this is where I really want to hear from you, because you have studied, you've written creatively, and you've studied more of like a verse style of writing. So talk us through this on your opinion. How do they differ, and what can you add to what Dory just said?
Yeah, to add to what Dory just said, that's really interesting. Just to throw another curveball, writing dialects and accents can make it even more confusing. And a trick to making authentic writing, to writing authenticity, is making it believable. And sometimes you can't do that if you're writing a character with a Southern dialect, and you speak all day. Like, you're not used to speaking with a Southern dialect, and you're writing that as an accent, a dialect, and that can be a challenge. I mean, it's fun to try to do, and I guess if you read it, I mean, I know right now the book that I'm reading uses like ha and and like, just to make it really relatable, and I understand that, and that's good. At the same time, though, it can be challenging if you're not used to speaking the way that the dialect or accent that you're trying to write, you don't use in your ordinary speech. So it can be challenging.
Absolutely. I've mentioned this a few times, and I'm part of an online Facebook-oriented writers group, and there's a lot of questions about how to write authentic dialogue from different dialects, and how far should an author go as far as trusting that the reader knows the dialect through their character development, and how much should a reader focus on trying to spell the words out to match the dialect? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, how some people, like, especially with Southern accents, you know, like AH is common, or trying to draw the word out. So where does that become distracting, and what is it an effective tool?
Yeah, I think just that's a really good point, is to spell out standard. And I think something that you have to do, if you use nuances or not using nuances. I mean, even with, just what is so true is you can't substitute good grammar. And I think that's important to note. And a couple of blogs I read is to keep it short when you're writing dialogue. And I try to do that with my own writing. I think that's common sense. At the same time, though, it's worth noting, not everybody knows that. I mean, you can write run-on and not even know you're doing it. And that's where you have to try to self-edit, and that's where good grammar and going over it, you know, and keeping it short, though, to start. I mean, if you write run-on, go back and try to just remember to keep it short. And also use repetition. I think another throwback to what I read over the summer in The Princess Bride was it was really good at using repetition. And if you can use that in your dialogue, you might not make so many mistakes. But just, yeah, standard spelling that you want to, so important to get grammar and spelling and punctuation right, and always try to do the best self-editing after you've written something. But I think, yeah, definitely my number one writing tip is to keep it short, which is, it might sound like common sense, but sometimes it's not always done. It's run on, and it can, I know On the Road, for example, used a lot of run on, and more in the narrative than the dialogue, but it still can be a problem when you get those confusing run-on sentences where, you know, the grammar is atrocious.
Yeah, so let me interrupt you here too, because Dory, in Scout's Honor, you didn't use a whole lot of like trying to match the vernacular per se. I just read everything in a Southern accent. So this is really interesting to see the 2 points, and I think it comes down to author style. So what I want you guys to kind of answer now, I think I might hear Julie. I think I hear extra noise. Yeah. So with style, when you're writing dialogue, when is it okay to write dialogue as you talk? Because we don't always talk grammatically correct. So is it okay to really just write your dialogue as somebody speaks?
I believe that it is, because I find, and I'm not talking about when it comes to accents. Like, I think Richard is absolutely right about accents. There's certain accents that if you try to write them out, it's hard to read. It's outright silly and annoying. I know one thing that I try, like when you said you read my book in a Southern accent on certain characters, I try to, there's certain words that are acceptable to use, like y'all. You know, y'all is a word that you can spell that out and it's not annoying, and it's distinctly Southern. And so you can throw words in there that are okay, that will still make the point that this person is talking in a Southern accent without reading every word long and drawn out, and things like that. And I've gone off on a tangent. I don't even remember the question.
When is it
I'm
okay
so
to
sorry.
No. James is actually unstuck now, so he's going to come in and chat with us too. 1 second. So the question, Dory, was, when is it okay to write dialogue just as we speak and not maybe focus on the grammar? Because I'm thinking of some books, I mean, like if we're looking from, you know, first person point of view, of course you have to go with something like The Catcher in the Rye. But sometimes, like, I don't always speak grammatically correct, right? You've got slang or pauses or breaks. So when can you just write dialogue like you would actually speak and let grammar kind of fly out the window? And when is too much?
I think a lot of it has to do with what your characters. I mean, most of us do not talk grammatically correct. Most of us just talk. I think it's important to, when you're writing dialogue, to write how people actually talk and not in some proper way all the time, unless the person is proper and your character is and does talk like that. But most people just don't, and I think that it's okay to end your sentences with a preposition and things like that, because that's how people talk. And usually most of us find, when someone corrects our grammar when we're in a conversation, we usually find that kind of annoying. Like, did you seriously just correct my grammar? And I was just talking about the football game,
Yeah. James, we've got you in here. I'm really excited for that too. So you've kind of been in the back listening to what we're saying. James, for those who are just joining us, is published top 5. He is not in the pending publishing author family. He is a brilliant author, though, and we came really close to welcoming him into the family, but just genre-wise, we couldn't make that fit. But he's a brilliant author, and he's published top 5, so we're glad to have him in as an outside author. He's been on mute here for a second while we're working through some technical challenges. James, what do you have to kind of tell us about dialogue and what you've heard Dory and Richard say? What can you expand on that or advise other authors?
Well, I can sure try. Can you hear me, first of all?
Perfect. I sure can.
Am I able to be heard? Hooray! That's fantastic. Dory, Richard, you've had just fantastic things to say, and how I would expand on that is that I do think, as Dory said, that it's very important to would talk, but I think that there's also a balance in that, whereas, if you took a tape recorder and put it beside yourself and listened to yourself and everyone else talk all day, it would be absolutely boring. I don't want to hear all that. So I think that it's a good idea to temper, that realism, because I don't read a book for realism. I don't want a transcript. And I think that's what, and I forget whom it was that was saying, 5 pages of dialogue book. So cut out all the boring stuff. I think that even with dialogue, it's just as important that every single word counts. And it's very, very difficult, I think, for an author to pull back from that, because we're humans. That's what we do. We talk, we communicate. So you get so attached to what your characters are saying that it's sometimes difficult to realize that. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. So that kind of goes back to a little bit of an earlier question that I compounded with another one. How can an author, and anyone can chime in on this one, but how does an author become self-aware for when to cut the dialogue and provide either internal monologue, action, cut dialogue in favor of tags, or just let the reader's imagination go? When is enough enough, and how does an author become self-aware to know?
I've found something that's been very, very helpful for me for dialogue as well as for everything else is to listen to the manuscript being read to me via like a text-to-speech program like on Kindle. Because I feel like as authors, this story, this is in me. This is, I've been working on this for months, for years, for whatever. I'm reading it in my head as I would say it, as I'm hearing these characters that I know as well as I know myself. When I upload that document into a Kindle, that's what I use, back to me with someone that doesn't have my inflection, that doesn't pause where I am imagining that they should pause, then is when I hear, oh my gosh, this is just, I don't even know who's talking right now, because it's just a script being read. That helps me cut dialogue, and it helps me also, I believe, Richard, what you were saying with regard to grammar and spelling being just critical. I catch so many things with grammar, with commas, with, simple things when I'm hearing it being read to me by an electronic device. So
I actually appreciate that tip, because I've only written 1 novel, and when I had my editor help me, she suggested to me that I actually get more dialogue because my characters were too stuck in their heads. And so I kind of had the opposite problem. and had to do a lot of pulling out of narrative and turning into dialogue. And that, and so I actually struggle with the opposite, coming up with dialogue and not getting too caught in my character's head. So that's actually I appreciate the tip as someone who's still actually just learning this myself.
I'm telling you, it's awesome. And if you want to sound really, really smart, go ahead and have it read it back in like an accent, because it can read it back in like I published with Pan Macmillan Australia, and I had it just for the heck of it. I had it read it back in an Australian accent, and I thought, oh geez, I just sound so much smarter than I actually am.
That's actually one of my favorite self-editing tips. So what I do is I actually use Google Translate, and I translate from English to English, and I'll just plug it in however much it lets me go, and then I'll let Google Translate read it out loud. And that's kind of what I do as one of our final steps. And like you said, James, it's amazing how much you catch, because your brain will automatically fill in the way that you wrote it and the way you want it to go. And so hearing that back is even from such a mechanical device, it really picks up different pieces. So that's an excellent point. Dory, I'm just now reminded about talking with Rachel and we had that discussion about, should I put more dialogue in? Should I not put more dialogue in? So that gave me a little giggle that you brought that up. How did you do it? Like, what was your biggest struggle? And this is really interesting here, because I thought we would really focus on creating too much dialogue, but we have a lot of great experience on this panel from people who might not be like huge dialogue monsters. So Julie, welcome. She's frozen again. Okay, so weird. Yeah. Well, welcome. At least we got to see your pretty face this morning. We'll see if we can get you in on any of the combo. So anyone, again, can chime in on here, but specifically, Dory, I'm interested in hearing from you about how you turned inner monologue into dialogue, and when you knew that what to put into dialogue. Like, how did you decide what was proper dialogue and what should stay inner monologue?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I don't think that there was a particular, system in place other than going through each inner monologue part and trying to piece out where I could turn that part of it into a conversation. And instead of just somebody talking about what they were talking about. And so how I could tell details instead in a conversation between two people or three people, rather than just the main character in that particular narrative talking about it. And so it was a grazing, it was a going through real slowly with a fine-tooth comb and trying to find those areas where I could bring out more character conversation.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I think that's going to help a lot of authors, especially as they're working with an editor and they might not understand how to follow the editor's advice or how to expand. So one of my last questions here for the full panel, and I want to hear from everybody on this, is advice for dialogue tags, because a lot of authors struggle with making their dialogue tags too fluffy or trying to be really descriptive in their dialogue tags, which sometimes some readers will argue takes away the fun of giving the character a voice. So when is it okay to simply say, hey guys, Tom said, or when should somebody be like, hey guys, Tom shouted across the room while he was jumping and throwing a basketball, So what advice would you have to authors is to when to tone down their dialogue, when to elaborate, and how to know how to keep that flow going without disrupting the voice of the author and their characters? Because dialogue tags can make or break a character a lot of times.
That's really interesting. I think you can end it by just saying she said or he said, and that can be enough, or you can not even use that at all if you've got a really good flow of dialogue, but you might want to describe it narratively, and so it can be a real, I think that's, it can be a real dilemma sometimes to know if it should be. I think it's the flow though, but I think to be or not to be, to use it effectively is where an editor can really help. And you really can't self-edit all the time. So yeah, I think that's the direction I was going with that.
That's a great point. Absolutely great point there. You can't always self-edit because you won't catch everything, especially when it's your writing, your brain, like we talked about, will automatically kind of fill in the blanks for you, and it will sound how you want it to sound, even if that's not how it's written. Who else wants to talk about how to... Thanks, Richard. That was great. Dory or James, what do you think about the dialogue tag predicament? I think Julie's still a little stuck, so we'll see if she can pop in. But
I think what James said earlier with regards to every word having a purpose is important, in that sometimes your dialogue is, you want your reader to feel like the conversation is quick. And so you might not weight it down, like, you know, two people are talking with wit and they're going back and forth, and you know, the boy said this and then the girl said that, and you don't even really have to identify who is saying what, because the reader kind of already fills in who is saying what because of the quickness of the conversation. And then other times, you know, the conversation is a little bit more weighted, and it's okay to add in those kinds of filler, not filler words. What you call them, tags?
Yeah, dialogue.
Right. Just to add more description to how the conversation is being viewed, and add more spice to the surroundings, to the conversation, and maybe how the characters are talking. And so, you know, like Richard also said, it's hard to always know. And that is where an editor is extremely helpful, because they're reading, you know, they're reading it themselves, and they're your reader in that moment, and they can let you know if this is too weighted, if this you need to slice through some of the extra verbiage.
If I could just add a point though, would it be possible to add a point?
Sure.
A lot of times too though, as important as editing is, if you've got that feeling, if you've got a really good feeling about the flow, trust that feeling, or the gut that you have, that, you know, that you maybe don't need that extra tag or narrative like beyond what you're doing, or sometimes you do need it, and you can trust your feelings. If you've really got that feeling for what you're writing, sometimes the feeling's not there, so you really do need the editor, and you always need an editor. But I just thought I would, you know, include that point.
Great, thank you.
I think too that what I continuously ask myself when I am going back and editing, because in a first draft I just let it fly, but editing I always ask, you know, is it relevant? Does it really, really matter? Because again, as I said before, every word counts, and also nothing irritates me more than when the same word is used over and over and over again. So if it is so-and-so, he said, he said, he said, he said, that just gets so repetitive that I feel like that does pull a reader out of the story. So when I'm reviewing my dialogue, again, does it absolutely need to be there? Is it a value add? Is it a value add that, what was it, Tom shouted as he threw a basketball across the room? To know at that point that Tom is throwing a basketball across the room, does it have to be right there? Is that a value add? Because if it's not, then it needs to go.
Lovely advice.
I really liked what Dory, sorry. I liked what Dory said about your conversations are very, very quick. They're very witty. So when I'm having a conversation with someone, if I'm throwing that basketball across the room, you're not pausing while I'm doing that. So if it is a conversation that is quick, that is full of emotion, passion, anger, whatever it may be, why would you cloud it down with something like that? Versus if it's maybe a conversation that is more quiet between two characters, where we might have some internal monologue, they might be taking a few breaths in between. Maybe that's a place where you can add some of that filler without destroying, the groove that the reader is in. So.
Richard or Dory, do either of you have anything to add on to that, or anything from earlier?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say to make sure that it makes sense, and yeah, you can get into a groove if you're writing on feeling, but you don't want to make it repetitive if it's not necessary. To sometimes throw away what you don't need. So yeah, I guess there's a lot to consider, and this is a great topic.
Yep.
The only thing I wanted to add about it is I don't know if anybody else does this, but one thing that I found helpful was if I'm struggling with a dialogue that I'm trying to come up with or trying to work out in my head, I have a long commute, so I'll be talking to I'll have my characters talk to each other in the car, and I'll work it out myself while talking to myself, and people around me probably think I'm insane while I'm driving, but I work out a lot of dialogue while I'm driving, and talking it out. And I don't know if anybody else does that.
Yeah, to read aloud and to act it out. I mean, that's something that I've done a lot in the past, and I've never really sat down though and written out what I'm doing when I'm writing dialogue. A lot of it for me is feeling, and it is acting it out and reading it out and having fun with the dialogue and creating new characters and the love of creating those new characters, and then making them authentic and believable and real, and trying to do that in a genuine way. So yeah, it's a great topic.
Yeah. So let's close down here with one more question. Who do you think, out of who you read as a reader, does anyone come to mind as a dialogue master? That's a tough question.
Okay, for fun. I will answer this for fun. One of my favorite authors that is just a guilty pleasure. She's not like this brilliant Pulitzer Prize winning author or anything, but I love her books because I love the dialogue. And it's Janet Ivanovich. She writes the Stephanie Plum series. And I got hooked on it because it takes place from near where I grew up. But, and so it's more probably of a nostalgia thing for me, but I love the way her character, the dialogue that she uses from the area where I grew up, and the way her characters are just slinging it around. I think that I don't know if she's from South Jersey, but she definitely has a great handle on the way people talk there, and has a masterful way of having her characters just sling the dialogue out.
Great.
I could say, if you really want to get messed up on dialogue, to read Trainspotting. Irvin Welsh does a lot of like what I would not recommend you do with dialogue, but he was so great at it. He was really awesome with that book. So if you want to read Trainspotting, but I wouldn't recommend you study that as the way to write dialogue.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sorry, I had to laugh with that one. James, you're back on mute, but did you have any author recommendations you want to pop in with?
Yeah, sorry, there was activity going on here and I didn't want to spoil the mood. And you did break up just a little bit when you were giving the original question. It was with regard, would you mind repeating?
Sure. Who do you consider to be an author that you think is a master of dialogue, or someone whose dialogue you really enjoy reading?
Well, this is going to be very much personal opinion here. I'm both a reader and a writer where I like to leave a lot to the imagination. So that's what I really appreciate as a reader, when there's not a lot of tags, when there's not a lot of interjections in between. So I'm going to go with an oldie but goodie. I really, really enjoy reading the dialogue of Hemingway. I feel like there's no guidance even sometimes to who is saying what. And it amazes me when I can, oh, Julie, are you here?
Hi.
Hello, friend. It amazes me when I'm able to read back the same page and imagine it as maybe it wasn't that character that I originally thought said this. Maybe it was somebody else, and how that changes the story time and time again. It makes it new every single time, and I love that.
Okay. As you were describing that, I could hear it, or not hear it, but see it in my head, exactly what you were talking about, and that's a great take on dialogue. Julie, the question here was, this was the final question, and then we're doing the how to find you and goodbyes, but we get you for one question. So do you have an author that you love, that you feel is really good at dialogue, or when you are reading their books, you just get sucked into what they're writing in their conversations?
I love Rochelle Mead. She does young adult, and she actually does adult as well. And once I start reading one of her books, I will just be gone, and like my husband will end up having to come find me like 4 hours later and like, where are you? I'm like, oh, sorry. And she's just so good, and her dialogue just feels so natural to me. It doesn't seem like it's forced, and it's always just like I can imagine myself having conversations with her characters. Like she makes sure that her characters are really varied in the way they talk. So she does have the different like accents or twangs that you can kind of pick up in. And then also in the way each character talks, she does a really good job of making sure certain characters use certain words, like her smarter characters use that advanced intellect, whereas her characters who are more like the party boys or whatever have kind of the more laid back. It's just she does a really, really nice job matching the dialogue to the way like the character would actually speak, and it's really good.
Great, nice. To close that round out here and close down the conversation, I'm going to have to go. I hate to admit this, but I can't pronounce his last name properly, but I'm going to say Chuck Palahniuk. Go ahead and slaughter me in the comments for saying that wrong, but Fight Club. When you're reading the book, some people, of course, pick up on the spoiler and other people don't. I think it's really, I've read quite a few of his books, but I love the way that he was able to do the two characters as the same person, but not totally give it away. And I thought that's a really good look at dialogue. So this was a great chat. I'm really glad that we got James in, and Julie, I'm glad you got to join us for that final question there. So
Sorry, it was my VPN. I apologize. And I was like, I told James I was going to be on today. Darn it, I'm going to be on.
Yeah, we've had dog
You kept
fights.
your promise. Thank you.
We've had dog fights outside all morning, but they quieted down during this entire call. So I was like, okay, because otherwise this would have been really bad. So let's go down the line. I want everyone to introduce themselves, and I want you to tell the audience again who you are, any little, quick blip that you want to give, especially James, since they might not be familiar with you, about your books, how they can find them. Let us know how the audience can catch up with you on social media going, because a lot of questions are out there about dialogue, and you've given really great discussion today, really shown yourself as understanding of dialogue. So some of our readers and author viewers might want to reach out to you to keep the conversation going. So let's go down. Let's go Dory, James, Julie, Richard. I'm just going to go down the line here and let's introduce ourselves.
My name is Dory Ann Dupre. I am the author of Scout's Honor. My website is DoryAnnDupre.com. And if you would like to start a dialogue with me, you can at I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram. I'm kind of on everything. Well, not everything, but a lot of things. And it's all under Dory Ann Dupre, D-U-P-R-E. I look forward to hearing from you.
Hey, James, can you unmute and introduce yourself?
Oh, I thought that I was going last, but okay. I'm James Stryker, and I am published with Pan Macmillan. My first book, Assimilation, came out in June of this year. You can reach me on Twitter. I'm always loud and obnoxious on there, as Julie can attest to, at jstryker21. My website is also just jamesstryker.com. And I will be having a second book released from, oh my God, 9 Star Press in December. And it's been wonderful chatting with you all. I'm glad I got to see you for a moment, Julie.
Okay. My turn?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'm Julie Sullivan, or J.M. Sullivan on my book. My story, Alice in Wonderland, will be debuting hopefully in June 2017. That's the plan. Through Pen Name Publishing, of course. It is a young adult thriller, I guess would be the best way, dark fantasy, to explain it. It's a retelling of Alice in Wonderland with zombies, except the zombies are not technically zombies, they're mome wrath. So come read and see what happens. You can find me on Twitter. That's how Mr. Stryker and I have met. I also have a blog, jmsullivan.weebly.com. Sorry. And I'm on Pinterest, but that's really more of like my mommy stuff. But hey, it's real fun. Also, my purple room is a Pinterest idea. I will be getting a sparkly wall. It's coming soon. Excited. And that's about it. So nice to meet y'all.
All right, Richard, wrap us up.
Yes, my name is Richard Tattoni, and I write YA for older teens, and I've gotten into a groove on writing dark fiction. My debut novel, Beyond the Blue Kite, will be released with Pen Name Publishing, and you can find me at richardtattoni.com or my unofficial blog site, Blogger, The Great Beyond. I have a presence all over the internet, but I primarily focus on Twitter and Facebook. There's a Beyond the Blue Kite Facebook page. Just search Richard Tattoni. I'm also on Instagram and Tumblr, but I'm mostly on Twitter if you want to talk. Even my cat is on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Your cat followed me. I had a conversation with your cat on Twitter. It was the highlight of my day.
She enjoyed that.
Oh, I love this. I love this so much. So if you've been watching, please check these authors out. Again, like I say this every time, but it's not only for them seeing their platforms and being able to go to their websites, talk to them live, continue the conversation. So even if you didn't catch us live, but you're still watching it later, it's never too late to carry on the conversation and talk to these authors. They love to chat with you. So next week, we will actually have James Stryker back, and we are doing a query letter workshop. So if you are an author who is ready to query your manuscript to publishers and you want some help on that, James will be walking you through how to write a query letter. So we're looking for 4 authors to join that and to have James kind of walk them through how to write an effective query letter.
Yes. If I could actually, if I could jump in real quick, just because James is a query genie. He is so qualified. He's actually the one who helped me write my query letter that got accepted by Pen Name Publishing. So he definitely has the qualifications.
Excellent plug. Excellent plug.
Yes, let me get your queries. I enjoy that. Well, I don't know. Did you see my message, Julie? I just got a message from someone else who got in with one of the queries I helped them with. So yes, let me help you with your queries. I would love to help you.
This is great. This is great because we get so many query questions. Like we actually get a lot of questions from authors who want to query us about how to write a query, believe it or not. So this is actually a really good need for this. So I love the connection going on here. We can't wait to have you back next week, James. In closing, I am Deanna Havilela, the kind of, the head rambler on these chats here. You can catch me live at FP Bookworks on Twitter. You can also reach out at FrenchPressBookworks.com if you have an idea for a future episode that you're struggling with, something with your writing, if you want a workshop specifically targeted to an issue. If you have, hit us up online and we will get that set for you. So I want to give our entire author panel again a wonderful thank you for joining us. This was a great conversation. I'm really happy that we had all of these viewpoints on and that Julie could join us to tell us about
that's my job. He is so fabulous. Everyone should know about James Stryker. Everyone.
There we go. All right. So everybody have a great evening. Have a great morning. And we will see you next week.
Bye.